Meanwhile, the House panel investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol is supposed to hear depositions today from two Trump allies, but at least one of them is unlikely to show. Lawmakers subpoenaed former Defense Department official Kash Patel and former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon. Bannon is refusing to cooperate, with his lawyer citing executive privilege. Still unclear if Patel will participate. Kris Van Cleave has been following the story, and he joins us now from the Hill to discuss. So, Kris, it's good to see you. What reasons did Bannon's lawyer give in the letter he sent to the committee? Executive privilege is something that's normally assumed or exerted by a sitting president of the United States.
Yeah, so in the letter here, the argument from Bannon's attorneys is basically the former president's lawyers have asserted executive privilege. And the former president's lawyers have said that by invoking executive and other privileges, they've directed Bannon and the other former Trump-era officials not to cooperate with this committee. So their argument is basically, because the former president has claimed executive privilege, we are going to adhere to the former president's request, and therefore will not be participating today and will not be turning over documents until or unless this goes to court and a judge rules that this executive privilege argument doesn't hold.
You know, it's not the first time we have seen Trump loyalists say no to congressional committees. And often, you know, the criticism is that these committees don't have a lot of teeth. They can't compel people to testify. So if Steve Bannon refuses to go before the panel, then what?
Well, so if you're Steve Bannon and his team, you're likely taking a calculated risk. The time it will take for this to work its way through the courts versus the amount of time the select committee has to do its job. You know, this Congress ends in a little over a year. So they have a timeline where they're going to have to produce a report and findings before then, if not a lot sooner. So the time it may take to work its way through the courts may end up in Bannon's favor. Now, the committee can pursue a criminal referral of contempt of Congress. And that would then have to play out through the legal system as well. So, you know, you could, if you wanted to be take a kind of a skeptic's approach here, a cynic's approach here, this is an effort to run out the clock.
So, Kris, the panel is also planning to depose some other key members of the Trump administration, including former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Deputy Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, and we already mentioned Kash Patel. What's the likelihood that they will comply with these subpoenas, and when would the depositions take place?
Well, we know that Patel and Meadows, as of late last week, had been at least interacting with the committee. What we don't know is if any of those three other Trump White House officials will actually show up for a deposition. Two are supposed to go today, two are supposed to go tomorrow. Scavino was just recently served with the subpoena, so he could argue that he hasn't had time to prepare, I suppose. But the short answer is we don't know, and I don't know that the committee knows for sure who will or will not show up. I think at this point, everyone watching this would be a little surprised if any of them show up, but they certainly could.
Can we talk about Jeffrey Clark? So he is a former Justice Department official that I really had not heard of, but the allegation is that he was instrumental in efforts to overturn the election results. Can we talk about why officials want to talk to him, why lawmakers want to talk to him, why he's being investigated?
Sure, and we understand from his lawyer that they have floated some, that Clark's team is trying to work out something with the committee. They don't know if they'll come to an agreement or not. But so Jeffrey Clark was a Department of Justice attorney who sort of came out of nowhere in the final days of the Trump administration. But he was a Trump loyalist who did appear to support the president's unfounded claims of election fraud. And we learned from a Senate Judiciary report appeared to take steps that could be looked at as trying to overturn the election. He was floated by former President Trump as a possible replacement to the then acting Attorney General, and this came to a head in a meeting in the Oval Office on January 3rd, according to the Senate report, where several top Justice Department officials and even the White House counsel threatened to resign en masse if, in fact, Jeffrey Rosen, the acting attorney general, was fired and replaced with Jeffrey Clark. And one of the people in that meeting referring to it as a murder-suicide pact. So they have a lot of questions for Clark, certainly, about his actions between the election and January 6th. And what he did and didn't do, and what these documents seem to indicate were his efforts to perpetuate the big lie and perhaps to overturn the election.
So yesterday, former acting attorney general, as we were talking about, Jeffrey Rosen, met with the panel for 8 hours. What details do we know about that, and why did the panel want to talk to him?
Well, he was the acting attorney general once Bill Barr left in December of 2020 and up through the end of the Trump administration, including January 6th. So he was your top law enforcement officer, top legal officer in the Justice Department during a very critical period of time that the committee is looking into. I think they're also going to be interested in that January 3rd meeting that we just talked about, some of the details and documents that were disclosed in the Senate Judiciary Report. Also, this was somebody who had a front row seat to what was going on in the lead up of January 6th, as well as the response the day of. We saw from emails and documents that have come to light that Rosen and his top deputy were skeptical of these claims of election fraud, that they didn't see some of the things that the president saw. In fact, in that January 3rd Oval Office meeting, the president purportedly said something to the effect of, to Rosen, you don't even think I'm right, when talking about replacing him with Clark. So lots of questions, lots of obvious questions for the former acting attorney general as he was, front and center for much of this stretch here.
So, Kris, there are hundreds of criminal cases associated with the January 6th riot working their way through the court system. Different judges are hearing different cases. But there's one particular D.C. federal judge that has been giving participants in the Capitol riot actually higher sentences than the prosecutors are recommending. At this point, we're not talking about, years behind bars, but it is sort of more than what is being requested. Can you tell us a little bit more about this particular judge and why she's choosing to go in this direction?
Sure. The judge's argument is pretty simple. She believes that if you participated in an attempt to disrupt democracy, if you participated in the storming of the Capitol, that there have to be consequences for that, and staying at home on probation isn't sufficient. So you've seen sentences where probation was recommended result in hours of community service being assigned. You've seen cases where prosecutors had asked for a month behind bars and the sentence was 45 days. These are not, radically higher sentences, but they are above what prosecutors are asking for. And it's a clear attempt by this judge to send a message that what happened on January 6th is unacceptable, and participants that were there that day that broke the law are going to face real consequences.
Yeah, some of these participants kind of were in there and they're taking selfies, and you really get the sense that they don't realize how grave the situation is and what they could be facing, and they're learning the hard way. Kris, thank you very much.
Sure thing.